Hello, guys. Thank you for tuning in. We have got two experts on the JFK assassination with us this evening. We've got Matt Crumpton and Fred Litwin. And loads of questions have come in all day from the viewers as various angles and aspects that you guys want to discuss. It's going to be absolutely fascinating. Trump is about to release these files. So obviously loads of questions have come up about that, what we can expect to be released. And the main themes are conspiracy versus lone gunman. So if you've got questions, put them in the chat. We will save them. We will put them to the guys as we go along. But a huge thank you to Fred and Matt for coming on. And before we get into it then, Fred, first, would you like to just tell the viewers a little bit about your background and what got you into this, please?
Well, I got into this in 1975 when I saw the Zapruder film on the Geraldo Rivera show. And I realized, oh my God, what's going on here? It looks like Kennedy was shot from the front. And how do we explain this? And so I went to the library. This is back in 75, got interested, started writing doctors and all sorts of people. And it just snowballed from there. And ultimately, I ended up writing 4 books debunking conspiracy theories on the JFK assassination.
Yeah, and both of our panelists' book links are in the description box below this video. So we've got On the Trail of Delusion, Jim Garrison, The Great Accuser is one of them. And then we've got A Heritage of Nonsense, Jim Garrison's Tales of Mystery and Imagination, Oliver Stone's Film Flat, The Demagogue of Dealey Plaza. And I was a teenage JFK conspiracy freak. I've also got the link to Fred's blog down there. But I'll bring Matt in now so he can give his perspective on what led him to his interest in JFK, please.
I've been interested in the case ever since I was a kid, and I saw the music video for Billy Joel's We Didn't Start the Fire with Ruby standing behind, killing Oswald behind Billy Joel when he's in the kitchen. And, all it took was the Zapruder film plus the knowledge that Ruby was killed, that Ruby killed Oswald a few days later. And I said, hey, wait a minute, this is a thing. And then, I've studied the case my whole life. And then I basically wanted to compare what are the conspiracy arguments or the critical arguments versus the official story / Warren Report defender or whatever arguments. And, that's kind of what my podcast does. We go point by point, and we kind of just look at the arguments. And so I don't equally, weight both arguments the same. Obviously, I have my perspective, but the point of my show is for people to at least know what the arguments are. And I think a lot of times in the this whole conversation about the JFK assassination, I find to be a microcosm of our discussion about politics. There's another reason I started it. What's happened is we're kind of in our own little groups, conspiracy people with conspiracy people, and sort of the official story folks stick together. And then when there is a debate, what happens a lot of time is just like politics, there's a thing called whataboutism, where somebody makes a good point, and then the other side, instead of addressing the point, they change the subject to something else, which maybe is a good point, but they never addressed the first point. So my whole thing is like, okay, let's go issue by issue so that we can't slip out. And I don't know the answers to everything. Some things I go, yeah, I don't know. That's a good point, but there's also this, so it's inconclusive. You know what I mean?
All right. So Matt is the co-author of the JFK assassination chokeholds that proved there was a conspiracy. Matt is an attorney and host of the Solving JFK podcast, which just passed 2 million downloads. Wow. And he's also appeared as a commentator in JFK, What the Doctors Saw on Paramount Plus. All right. So, Fred, how many shooters, in your opinion, were there?
There was just one shooter, and that was Lee Harvey Oswald firing from the Texas School Book Depository.
And did you think his gun had the capability to perform this assassination?
Oh, well, easily. He was a sharpshooter in the Marines. And if you ever go to Dealey Plaza, you'll see, oh my God, these are easy shots. I mean, the first shot was 55 yards. The last shot was 85 yards. Very easy shots. He had around 10 seconds to fire 3 times. Easy, really easy. So there's nothing to this. And yeah, he had the ability to do this.
What was his motivation?
Well, that's a very good question. And, you know, it's hard because he was killed by Jack Ruby. He never told us. So the best we can do is to sort of look at his life and try and come up with some idea of why he did it. I believe that he did it because of Cuba, and that he was very, very angry at what he saw the United States doing to Fidel Castro, and he wanted to strike a blow for the Cuban Revolution. If you go back in September 1963, Oswald was living in New Orleans, and there was an article in the New Orleans Times-Picayune, September 9th, reporting on a speech that Castro gave in Havana, warning American leaders that they would not be safe if the attacks on Cuba continued. I'm sure Oswald saw that article and was incensed at what was happening, and here was a chance to strike a blow for the Cuban Revolution.
So one of our viewers wants to get your thoughts. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's bring you in. Definitely.
Okay, so the straightforward points Fred makes certainly make a ton of sense if that was all the information. It's just that's not all the information. So when it comes to Oswald in particular, Fred said that Oswald was a sharpshooter in the Marines. Let's talk about that. We have 2 shooting tests from the Marines. One in 1956, where indeed Oswald scored 212 out of 250 to get this sharpshooter ranking. The only other one is right as he was leaving the Marines in 1959. He scored the minimum score to pass, which is marksman. You start at 190 on this test. Oswald got a 191. So to say, you can't just say, "Ooh, he's a sharpshooter," without including the fact that, wait a minute, he biffed the only other test he did. That's 50% of the tests he's even on record taking. Second of all, there are numerous Marines who served with Oswald who said that he was an embarrassingly poor shot. Okay, I cover all this in detail in my podcast. The other thing, if Oswald was a shooter, we would expect a shooter to have practice, because what Fred said, I just want to say this. You go to the museum, Dealey Plaza, and you look at how close it is. It is very close. Absolutely, anybody off the street, you hand them a gun, even this 30-06, they probably could have hit one of those shots. Okay, but the challenge is this is a bolt action rifle. Okay, which has everything in the case is disputed, by the way, every little thing. But anyway, but the bolt action rifle has there's a window of how long it could possibly take. And so you're working with the window of how long we know the fastest person that's ever done the bolt action rifle in those shots versus the time in the Zapruder film. Okay. So anyway, to say all that, Oswald would have needed practice, a lot of practice. But the official story is that the last time he had practice was in a random field near the airport where he took a rifle on a bus, according to Marina, his wife, in April. There is not even an allegation that Oswald had any practice at all. Okay. I mean, Fred, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not even aware of an allegation. And the last point is so Oswald could not have done it. He didn't have practice. He wasn't a good shooter. And then not even the pros could do it. Okay. So what do I mean by that? Well, the FBI tried to recreate for the Warren Commission what they said happened. They set up shooters at stationary targets from only 30 feet up. Well, Oswald was 60 feet up on the 6th floor. 5 out of the 6 world-class riflemen who tried to hit all 3 shots in the allocated time failed. Later, in 1967, CBS News ran a more accurate experiment. They had 11 professional marksmen trying to hit a moving target from 60 feet up. Those 11 pros took 37 attempts to hit 2 of the 3 shots. They were successful in 3, or 8.1% of the time, for world-class marksmen. So that's my rebuttal to Fred's point.
If I can just reply, I mean, I think that, look, Oswald was a marksman at the end of his time in the Marines, but that was also a time when he really gave up and really didn't care much. Now, he was still, you could fail the test. There were 3 levels. He still got the minimum level, which is a marksman, which is still a pretty good shot. And you could actually go see his Marine scorebook, and it's really good. I mean, he hit the target an awful lot. The problem with the test that you say, I mean, everything you say is correct. The problem here is the test that they did was really trying to do 3 shots in 5.6 seconds. He had 10 seconds. If you really tested that with a marksman and gave them 10 seconds, they'd have no trouble hitting the target. There was lots of time. This was very, very easy. And we know he did it because it was his rifle.
what about Oswald's history then, psychologically? Because we had Ernst Titovitz on, who claimed to be Oswald's best friend in Russia, and he said that Oswald didn't have a violent bone in his body. Did he have a history of, whereby he was capable of performing an assassination on the president? Any kind of red flags?
Well, I think you would say that about anybody who was accused of shooting a president. Oh my God, we never saw that. But Oswald did have a violent past. He pulled a knife at his own mother. He pulled a knife on his stepbrother. So he did have some violence, and of course he beat his wife. But yeah, people change. So the Oswald that Titovitz saw in the Soviet Union was slightly different from the Oswald a few years later, and he had changed somewhat.
I mean, I would just add that it's true that Oswald did beat his wife, and it's also true that he pulled a knife on his mom when he was in New York. But these are the wife beating. I'm not going to defend, obviously, but pulling a knife on his mom, she was not that nice of a person. I'm just kidding. I'm not going to defend that either. But it's an isolated incident, and so Oswald certainly was not known to drink. He was not known to go around and get in fights with other people. But yes, it's absolutely true that he did beat his wife and he did pull a knife on his mom when he was like 11 or 12.
Okay, Fred. So what about the possibility of Oswald being used? Let's just assume Oswald did it. Are you saying that he just did it without any outside help? Is there a possibility that he could have had outside help?
I don't think he had outside help. There is one unanswered question, and there is the possibility that maybe somebody in Dallas was egging him on. Say, hey, you should do this. I mean, that is certainly a possibility. I don't think it's true because he was such a loner. I mean, here was a man who really had very few friends, hung out with very few people, had very few known associates. So I don't think he was used, and I don't think somebody egged him on, but that is possible.
So
yeah, I mean, I would just, if I could just, I mean, obviously, I don't think Oswald fired any shots at all. So I think he was a patsy purely like he says he was. But one thing that Fred said, which I think is an important point to address, is that we know it was Oswald. You forget the could he done it or not. We know it was because it was his gun. Okay. And it's true. Again, you look at the surface level. If you just read Gerald Posner, then 1,000%. The lone gunman team wins. Okay. It's just that there's a lot more information. So we look at this, and yeah, it's got C2766. It's got the serial number stamped on the rifle. It's the same one that's linked to Oswald's P.O. box. Hey, that looks bad for Oswald. Okay. But here, let me just give you a few facts to chew on. Oswald ordered a rifle that was 36 inches long. They sent him a rifle that was 40 inches long. Okay. I mean, maybe they ran out of 36-inch rifles, but that is definitely an anomaly. Oswald mailed the money order, supposedly, and the rifle order form on March 12th from Dallas, but the money order was deposited the next day in Chicago. So you put it in the mail on March 12th, and then it gets to Chicago. How long does it take to get to Chicago? I mean, it wasn't overnight first class. There wasn't a jet, but let's assume it gets there in one day, which I don't think at all is the case. You still have to receive it at the place at Klein's. They have to process it. Then they have to send someone to go deposit it. So that is definitely an anomaly that is deposited the next day. No one ever saw Oswald pick up the rifle or the pistol from the post office. We have no witnesses that saw that. He never signed for it. Oh, and by the way, the Dallas postal inspector was reading Oswald's mail as of April 1963. And we're supposed to believe that the postal inspector would not have been aware of guns that were shipped to a P.O. box of someone whose mail he was reading. And then finally, the name on the P.O. box was Lee Oswald, but the rifle was ordered in the name of A.J. Hidell. So I don't dispute that the rifle was physically present on the 6th floor. I do dispute that there is any, I think there are real problems with the evidence to hang your hat on. The fact that the gun is there is the proof.
So Bailey's asking you, is the actual story covered up to protect someone else?
Depends who you ask. I mean, Fred would say no. I would say yes. So yeah.
Oh, I actually will say I do actually believe there were cover-ups. And I think this is what really makes the case so interesting. I think there were a lot of cover-ups. The CIA was covering up their involvement in trying to assassinate Castro. The FBI was trying to cover up the letter that Oswald sent about his threats to maybe the FBI building or office. Secret Service was covering up their stuff. You had all these cover-ups going on, and so these cover-ups made it appear that there's a big conspiracy, that they're covering up a conspiracy. But no, they were covering their ass. That's the cover-ups that happened.
So, Matt, Casabur asking, what was Ruth Payne's involvement other than the landlady?
Ruth Payne, that's a fun one. Here's the deal with Ruth Payne. I mean, there's her involvement was basically she met Marina Oswald at a party. It was actually George de Mohrenschildt's going away party. And she then pursues a relationship with Marina Oswald and tries to get Marina and Marina's 2-year-old June to move in to her house. So it's, you know, the arguments are, was Ruth Payne just a nice lady who's trying to help these people? And by the way, she was interested in Russian and she spoke Russian. And so the argument is, well, she wanted someone to converse with in Russian who was recently from the Soviet Union. But the issue with Ruth Payne is there's all these shady, first of all, there's all these pieces of evidence that come from Ruth Payne. So that in and of itself doesn't prove anything about Ruth Payne, because if the evidence really was there, if it really was bad evidence for Oswald and Ruth Payne happened to find it, then we would expect her to have the evidence. But it's just like the hits keep coming. There's just item after item of all the things that she found, and then she has all these wild connections, and that's kind of what gets people's attention, is the connections that Ruth Payne has. So her dad worked for, hey, this is in the news right now, USAID, which was admittedly indisputably a CIA cutout at the time. Some people would say it still is today. And her sister was a W-2 salaried employee of the CIA. Her brother-in-law also worked for USAID. Her dad was her dad knew George de Mohrenschildt from their business dealings in Haiti. That's crazy. I mean, maybe coincidences do exist. Okay. The big question is, what's your coincidence threshold? Okay. That's the question. They definitely exist. But okay. So it keeps going. Ruth's husband, Michael, his stepdad was the creator of the inventor of Bell helicopter, and Arthur Young. And so her husband had a high-level military security clearance. And her husband's mother was best friends. And again, we're going husband's mother's best friend. I get it. That's not a direct tie, but just listen to what I'm going to say. Michael Payne's mom's best friend was Allen Dulles' mistress. Okay. And you go, okay, it was his mistress during World War II. Who cares? Okay. But they remained close friends. They remained close. The mistress actually became closer with Allen Dulles' wife than with Dulles in later years. So that's weird. And so I can look at all that, even the Dulles part, and I can go, coincidences. That's weird. But what gets me, it's funny, different facts get different people, right? What gets me is there's a witness whose name I forget off the top of my head. Maybe I can find it for you here. But basically, his name is Frederick Osborne Jr. He's a character witness for the Paynes, and he's brought in to say, look, these are upstanding people. They're great. And Frederick Osborne Jr.'s dad was Allen Dulles' best friend in college. Now, when I say best friend, you can attack best friend, but there's dozens of letters back and forth. They indisputably worked closely together. Okay. So again, but what have I said? Just ties. All I've said is ties that she has. Okay. So the thing, once we get, and there's a lot more with Ruth Payne, by the way, and people want me to go deep in on Ruth Payne are going to be disappointed that I didn't go through the whole thing. There's more. There's much more. There's about 12 different things. But the bottom line is there is not one individual, and my perspective is that Ruth Payne was involved. Okay. That is what I think after looking at the evidence, but that is only because of the cumulative evidence altogether. There is not a single smoking gun that definitively proves that Ruth Payne was involved, and she's still alive, by the way. And so yeah, I can't say she did it, right? Because that's defamation, and I don't have proof of that. I can say when we look at these 11 facts, you go, huh, that's my coincidence threshold has been surpassed. I just can't believe that. So that's my position on Ruth Paine.
I saw Fred shaking his head a few times there.
Well, you know, I mean, here it is. I mean, I actually spent 3 or 4 days with Ruth Paine at the 60th anniversary in Dallas. I hung out with her for she's a wonderful woman who has spent her whole life trying to help people. She is really, really a beautiful person.